Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast of things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Jay Fidell.
And I'm Duke Oishi.
In our show tonight, we'll show you what Dr. Pete Britos' class at HPU did in setting up a real live video interview of Governor Neil Abercrombie.
ThinkTech was delighted to follow them on their project. We thought they were a great bunch of kids, and they did a great job, but you can see for yourselves. Now, for your viewing pleasure, here's a movie they made.
Aloha, and welcome to Hawaii Pacific News. I'm Alisa Soon, and this is Serena Karnagy. Today's show is dedicated to HPN's exclusive interview with Governor Neil Abercrombie in the state capitol's executive chambers. Serena, you had the opportunity to sit down with the governor. Was it what you expected?
Well, he was extremely knowledgeable about the subjects we covered. That I expected. But he also made a point of shaking hands with every single person in the room, from crew member to our student audience, even though he was in the middle of a very busy day meeting with the legislature and signing in the new Board of Education.
Wow. Was there any particular part of the interview that stood out for you?
Well, overall, he seemed pretty positive about the direction of his administration thus far. Let's take a look. Aloha, my name is Serena Karnagy with Hawaii Pacific News, and I'm very honored and privileged to have our Governor Neil Abercrombie with me today. Do you think sustainable agriculture is feasible for our economy right now?
Well, whether it's feasible or not, we have to try and make it feasible because we have no choice. If we're going to survive in this century, we cannot continue to ship literally billions of dollars a year out to import food. Right. Particularly in a world where global warming is taking place, where population expansion is underway, where industrialization in previously undeveloped nations and regions of the world like Southeast Asia and the China continent are taking place, Africa, even in the island nations. In South Asia, the Philippines, Indonesia, et cetera, on into the Holy Crescent in the Middle East. With that kind of expansion, if you will, going on and increased consumption of oil, it's imperative that Hawaii do two things in terms of sustainability where agriculture is concerned. One, energy, because it takes a lot of energy to grow things. We have to become as self-sufficient as we possibly can be where energy is concerned. We have a lot of natural resources that could enable us to do that. And in turn then to grow as much of our own food, sustain ourselves literally that way as possible, if only out of self-defense against some of these global forces that are out there right now, including climate change, as well as international economic forces which can overwhelm a small venue like Hawaii.
Changing subjects a little bit, what do you think about reducing homelessness here in Hawaii?
Well, I'm doing more than thinking about it. Part of the reason that it has not only taken place but increased has to do with the economic circumstances that we have been facing. Just in the last year, the number of people on food stamps has increased 11%. The number of people on general assistance, those without any other source of income, has increased 14%. The number of people on Medicaid, the system of federal and state support for medical care, premiums and payments to provide medical insurance for people, and access to medical facilities, access to health care. That's increased from 250 to 270,000 people in a year. Fully a quarter of the state's population is on Medicaid right now. That means that the outlay of dollars just in the area of health care, just in the area of medical assistance and so on, is in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so as a result of that, it is crystal clear to me that homelessness is but a manifestation of that general problem. It's a harbinger. It's a bell ringer. It stands out as an indication in no uncertain terms that we've got to come to grips with the social and economic forces that have caused this to happen. People don't have homes. They don't have shelter. They don't have any confidence that they can sustain themselves. They may have mental disabilities, physical disabilities, a combination of those ailments. And so what we have to do under those circumstances is create the kind of housing that will provide shelter, no matter what category people are in. Some people are working, they're even in families, but they can't earn sufficient money because the rental housing within the confines of the net income that they have simply isn't available. So I'm going to be concentrating on building that housing, on getting workforce housing built, on taking advantage, for example, of the land that we have around schools. We have arguments about schools right now. Well, it's a small school, there's a lot of land, there's not enough people around, we're going to close the school. Why? You've already got the facilities. Why not build housing right on the available land that's right there, particularly rental housing, housing that can be afforded by people. Put in senior housing, put that next to recreational facilities. I say senior housing that recognizes that we have more people living longer than ever before in greater numbers. And that has real implications, not only just on the medical side, but on the expenditure side as well. With people who are living longer, they have to have the income to be able to sustain themselves, even if they're in good health. If their income isn't sufficient to enable them to live an independent life, you're going to have consequences from that. So the homeless phenomenon is indicative of this broader question that we have about housing, about jobs, about education, to enable people to get the kind of work that will enable them to get sufficient funds to be able to sustain themselves. So I've named a homelessness coordinator, if you will, to, Mark Alexander, former Vicar General of the Roman Catholic Church. In other words, a hard-hitting executive who has had some experience literally with some of the organizations that have been dealing with homelessness. And he's working intra-departmentally and inter-departmentally to go at it exactly in the manner that I've indicated, getting the financing together to get not just shelter, but homes for people, and to move them literally into circumstances where they can make a living, to be able to afford those homes, and to be able to have shelter and sufficient breathing room, psychologically, emotionally, and economically, to be able to say of themselves, I can do this, I can make this. And so I intend to move forthwith on all of that across the board.
Now, in terms of the disasters that recently struck Japan, do you think that Hawaii is possibly ready to handle that type of disaster at that level?
Oh, no, I don't think anybody's able to handle anything at that level. I mean, that there was nothing that literally I think Japan could have done. In fact, they were as well prepared or better prepared than practically anybody. But when something of that nature takes place, with that kind of force of nature coming into the picture, there wasn't much that could happen. What happens afterwards is what counts. What kind of preparation is there? Now, where they clearly fell down in this was with regard to the nuclear plant that was situated in an area that they needed to take a lot more precautions than they did. That was a failure of regulation, I think, there, where you have to be very, very careful when people talk about the idea that too much government. Believe me, when it comes to something like that, there wasn't enough government in the first place. They should have been much more hard-nosed and severe about what was required in order to meet that. Now, on that score, I think there is some improvement. I'm very happy with the way we handled it this last time, but we were also very fortunate that we didn't have more extreme circumstances to have to come to grips with. So I think what we have is the right structure. We have the right personnel who understand what needs to be done. I think we're going to have to learn from some lessons from the experience we had just recently with the tsunami about preparation. We're not going to move people away from the shoreline. These are islands. People have always lived there. We understand that's going to be the case, that people are always going to live on the beach and around the shoreline. So the question becomes, what can we do to minimize the adverse circumstances that might come from a tsunami? And I think within the next year or so, when we apply some of the lessons that we've learned in that regard, I think we're going to be much better prepared than we would have been otherwise. On the whole, people reacted very, very well. They did what they were told. The information that went out was accurate. The information was received and acted upon in an adult and responsible way by almost everybody. There was just a few Lolos out there that ignored common sense and what we should have been doing. You know, you saw pictures of them walking on the beach and so on. You cannot account for deliberate stupidity, and those folks at some point they were lucky that nothing worse happened. But aside from a couple of anomalies like that, on the whole, everybody acted in a responsible and sober manner.
Definitely. If you don't mind, I'd like to open up the questions to
Sure.
some audience
Pleasure.
members.
Hi, I'm Emily. I was wondering, is the state taking any steps to monitor the radiation in the ocean and air from the threat in Japan?
Yes. That's one of the examples. Maybe should have used that as an example in case not everybody heard the question. Was about monitoring radiation, ocean and air and so on, and what the possible effects might be of radiation being transmitted either through the water or in the upper reaches of the atmosphere from the winds. Yes, we do. That's one of the reasons that I don't want to cut Department of Health or university positions any more than they already have been, because these are the kinds of things that have to be done by experts. These are the kinds of things that have to be done by professionals. These are the kinds of things that have to be done by people who know what they're doing and on an ongoing basis. And we're very fortunate that we have a very good system of tracking the capacity for measuring radiation. And as, again, luck would have it, the pathway in which such radiation as is extending out from Japan is taking place tends to lead it away from Hawaii. It tends to lead it to bypass Hawaii. And such radiation as is there is in such minuscule amounts as to not pose either an immediate or even interim hazard to people. Now, that's not to say that couldn't change over time, but that's one of the reasons for doing the monitoring. But I'm quite satisfied that what monitoring we are doing and what advice I am getting right now is solid and at least up to the present time is not cause for alarm.
Hi, my name's Mallory. Given our budget problems, do you think it'd be a good idea to give up the rail project and save the money?
Well, the rail project, the question is about the rail project and given our budget problems. There's a combination of questions in there, or a combination of answers. The rail is for Oahu. It's not for the other islands. And it is a city and county project. It's not a state project. Now, that's easy to say. It's another thing to have to live with, because as everyone here is quite aware, the island of Oahu has about 70% of the population of the state. And where the rail is concerned, about half the population of the state lives on the leeward side of the island of Oahu. So for practical purposes, it's difficult to differentiate the state and the city and county of Honolulu when it comes to the impact of the rail project, both from a social and economic perspective as well as a fiscal perspective in terms of the costs. Now, the costs on the whole, at least from the city and county of Honolulu's side of things, is borne from the 0.5% of the excise tax that is collected on the island of Oahu. That includes people who come here, obviously, from other places or other counties within the state when they come to visit visit Oahu, and expend money here. They pay an extra 0.5%. That money has accumulated over time, and that is the object of some concern by the state legislature, given the fact that we, and myself, given the fact that we have this big deficit, which is implicit in your question. And so could we put that money to good use? Now, the claim is made, no, the money is for the rail. Well, it might be, but if it's just sitting there and can't be used for 10 years because it's not getting underway, then why not use it for practical purposes, projects, and so on? I would not want to use it to fill the budget puka, however, the budget hole. You don't want to do that because then you're just borrowing money to fill the dollar gap that you have, and you're going to have to not only pay that back, but pay it back with interest. So if you're borrowing the money in order to build bridges or build schools or repair hospitals or roads, some practical utilization of the funds that has a positive economic and social impact 10, 15, 20, and 30 years down the road, that's another use of the money. So the answer to the question is it's less whether the budget deficit or the difficulties with the economy right now would be alleviated in any way by not going ahead with the rail, because an argument could be made that going ahead for the rail will churn money through the economy and there'll be transit-oriented development and so on. But all of that right now is in the abstract. The real question is it going to be able to get underway at all? Or will it be stalled for whatever reason? And if it is it a good idea to keep on pumping money in that direction and not using it for the building of schools or maintaining roads or hospitals, et cetera, housing, financing housing, or development that could take place along the route, perhaps if it was configured in another way rather than the up-in-the-air rail that they have right now, the kind of heavy rail system that they're contemplating. So this is a question that has to be resolved, I think, fairly quickly. Is the rail ever going to get underway? And if it gets underway, is it actually going to accomplish what it says it's going to do? Or has time and circumstance outstripped its utility simply because it didn't get underway soon enough? And if it doesn't get underway, or it's determined that it isn't going to have the impact that we were hoping for, that many people were hoping for, then do we need to go in another direction? I think that's one of the things that's going to be decided in the next year.
We were speaking a little bit more about sustainable agriculture, and I was just wondering if you think that geothermal should be a more dominant source of energy.
That's a good point, because so much of the ag land is on the Big Island of Hawaii. And the Big Island actually, in addition, I think, has more to say and to do with the question of energy than any of the other islands, most particularly Oahu. Oahu probably has the least to offer in terms of alternative energy possibilities. And the Big Island of Hawaii, larger in land size than all the other islands combined, and with a population spread out over a lot greater area, of course, probably has the most to offer in terms of alternative energy resources, biofuels, geothermal, OTEC, wind, solar, etc., but particularly geothermal. Now, there's some geothermal underway already. There's some idea of expanding that to some minor degree right now. But the real question is will we be able to make the kind of investment in geothermal to take full advantage of what the possibilities that are there on the Big Island? I think we're going to have to move in that direction, experiment with it, take some chances, maybe pull together some public and private partnership on that, with the state working perhaps with private enterprise on it in some hopefully mutually beneficial way, because we have to have renewable energy resources. We simply can't rely, going back to the beginning of our conversation, we can't rely on the continued import of fossil-based fuels. The costs are, of course, enormous. It's not that growing our own fuel like biofuels or utilizing geothermal and being able even to transmit it between islands is necessarily a big cost saver. It might even be as expensive or more expensive right now than oil. But the money stays here, the jobs stay here, and it's renewable. Whereas once you send money out for a barrel of oil, you just have to keep sending money out for the next barrels of oil. There's nothing renewable about it all. The only thing that you get to renew is your contract for keeping money going out of the state. So that's unsustainable. We simply can't afford to keep doing that. So I think geothermal is more than just theoretical. I think it's probably a harbinger, a bell ringer, an indication, a clear indication of where we need to go, where we need to make an investment in renewable alternative fuel resources.
What are your other plans for getting Hawaii out of the recession?
Well, I want to put people to work. I think it sounds a little bit like a contradiction in terms, but if you're in a deficit, if you're in a hole, what you need to do then is to put people to work. Stop digging that hole. And what I want to do is as soon as I can, July 1st, I'm trying to get out of the wreckage of this last year of the last administration. The way elections work, you get elected, but I'm still having to deal with the last few months of the last administration's budget year up till June 30th. As we're doing this interview, it's about 2.5 months from now, but we're doing this about mid-April. So I've got to get to June 30th, and there's a big puka, a big hole that I have to fill there in terms of likely expenditures and lack of revenue to do it. So once I deal with that, and one of the reasons I'm a little late getting to our interview today is I'm trying to figure out ways with the legislature that we can fill that gap. Once we get to that, then I intend to see to it that we go on a public works program somewhat the same way that Franklin Roosevelt did for the nation back in the 1930s. This is our equivalent of the Depression taking place right now. So right now we have a lot of people on unemployment. We have a lot of people on general assistance. I mentioned we have the opportunity then to put people to work building that workforce housing, put people to work getting the schools up to par, making repairs and maintenance expenditures that for our basic infrastructure all across the states, all across the islands rather, across the whole state. And I believe that if I do that, that we'll find partnership with investors who understand that there's a hunger for housing in Hawaii, and that can be the catalyst for kicking off the kind of investment that we need to make in ourselves that will create jobs, which will in turn create paychecks, and paychecks which will turn revenue back into the state in terms of taxes, profits for companies, and the kind of partnership in energy and food and the other areas that I've mentioned that will, I think, not just kickstart the economy, but bring us back into a prosperous phase that we haven't enjoyed for some years.
Definitely. And as a last question, as you know, we're all from HPU, so I was wondering if you had any particular message for the youth of Hawaii.
I was pleased to be able to think that you might want to interview me today, and even more pleased to be able to reach out to HPU students and say to them that they've got a friend in this governor.
Well, thank you so, so much for having us. It really means a lot to all of us, and I speak on behalf of everyone. We really appreciate it. So thank you so much,
Thank you
Governor.
so much. All right. Aloha.
Thank you. Once again, this is Serena, and I am very thankful to have spoken with our governor, and this is Hawaii Pacific News. Thank you.
Aloha.
You folks sure covered a lot of ground. Anything he said to you personally that stood out?
Well, it was interesting because afterwards he actually pulled me aside and told me that as a journalist, I should never have to agree with what he's saying or any other interviewee is saying, that we should just retain our journalistic objectivity.
Good advice for all of us. This is Alisa Soon for Hawaii Pacific News.
And this is Serena Karnagy.
Aloha.
Thanks to Dr. Pete Britos for bringing his class to us and for his help on making this movie. We hope we can work with him again on similar projects in the near future. Thanks also to Justin Ornelas, the HPU producer of the movie, and all the kids who participated. And thanks also to Governor Neil Abercrombie and his staff for helping them and us make this movie.
And now, here's our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
On July 8th, the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum will present its annual Energy Day celebration at the Laniakea Women's Y on Richard Street. Reserve your seat for this program on hepf.org.
And on July 28th, ThinkTech, the Hawaii Venture Capital Association, and Pacific New Media will present a luncheon program at the Plaza Club entitled The New Public Utilities Commission, featuring a panel of commissioners and staff from the PUC. If you want to know what's going on in the new PUC under the Abercrombie administration, check it out. You can reserve your seat for this program at hvca.org or thinktechhawaii.com. We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech, but first we want to thank our underwriters.
Thanks to the Scheidler Family Foundation. Jay Scheidler, through the Scheidler Family Foundation, supports a number of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
Hawaiian Electric Company, HECO and its affiliates, Miko on Maui and Helco on the Big Island, are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company which has a large presence in and commitment to Hawaii.
Oceanet, a local tech company, is one of Hawaii's largest and most diversified science and engineering companies.
Don't forget ThinkTech. We're funded by gifts and grants from people like you. Please help us out by making a contribution on thinktechhawaii.com. It'll help us with this program and with all the other things we do to raise public awareness about tech, energy, diversification, and globalism in Hawaii. Thanks so much. Okay, Duke, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Duke does, and Lori Wingard also. For additional times, check out oc16.tv.
You bet, Jay. For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com. Be a sponsor and help us reach Hawaii.
I'm Jay Fidell. Thanks for joining us on ThinkTech.
And I'm Duke Oishi. Aloha, everyone.